Title: My new job gave me one rule: never look at the basement door. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. Before the job posting vanished, hundreds applied. Only one was hired. The pay was generous, the hours were simple, and the rule was impossible to misunderstand. Never look at the basement door. What happened after that rule was broken was never reported, never documented, and never officially acknowledged. This is the account reconstructed from what was left behind. The building stood in a quiet industrial block that had been abandoned so gradually that no one noticed when it stopped being used entirely. It had once been a municipal records facility, then a storage annex, then nothing at all. By the time the job listing appeared online, the surrounding businesses had long since closed, leaving the street dark even during the day. The structure itself was tall, narrow, and windowed in a way that suggested it had been designed to observe rather than welcome. The man who accepted the job had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. He was between work contracts, exhausted by uncertainty, and desperate for something stable. The posting was brief: overnight building caretaker. Minimal duties. No prior experience required. High pay. Immediate start. A phone number was listed instead of a company name. When he called, the line rang only once before being answered, and the interview consisted of confirming his name, age, and availability. The position was offered before the call ended. He arrived the following evening just before sunset. The front entrance opened with a heavy resistance, as if the hinges were unfamiliar with movement. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of dust and cold concrete, not unpleasant, just old. The interior lights flickered awake slowly, revealing long corridors, blank office rooms, and metal shelving units stripped of their contents. Everything was clean, but nothing felt maintained. The building gave the impression of having been paused rather than abandoned. A man was waiting for him near the security desk. He looked like someone who had been awake for too long, his posture slightly bent, his eyes too alert for the hour. He handed over a ring of keys, a laminated ID badge, and a single printed sheet of paper. The paper was not a contract. It was not a list of responsibilities. It was one sentence centered on the page, written in thick black ink. Never look at the basement door. There were no explanations, no elaboration. The man left immediately after handing it over, locking the front door behind him. The caretaker was alone in the building before he had time to ask questions. The sense of isolation was immediate and complete, like stepping underwater. The outside world felt distant the moment the lock clicked into place. The first hour passed uneventfully. He explored the ground floor, noting emergency exits, checking that doors were secured, and familiarizing himself with the layout. There was no surveillance system, no monitors, and no instructions to patrol specific areas. The job seemed almost ceremonial, as if his presence alone fulfilled some requirement. The silence was consistent, broken only by the hum of electricity running through unseen systems. He discovered the basement stairwell by accident while checking a maintenance hallway. The stairwell door was unmarked and painted the same dull gray as the surrounding walls. It was ordinary in every way except for its placement. It sat alone at the end of the hall, not connected to any visible infrastructure, not labeled, not referenced on the building map pinned near the security desk. It looked less like an entrance and more like an omission. He remembered the rule immediately. Never look at the basement door. At first he interpreted it literally. Do not open it. Do not go down there. That seemed reasonable. Basements in old buildings were often unsafe, full of exposed wiring and structural hazards. The wording struck him as odd, though. It did not say never enter. It did not say never open. It said never look. The phrasing lingered in his thoughts longer than he expected. He avoided the hallway for the rest of the night. The following night settled into a pattern. He arrived just before sunset, unlocked the building, completed a slow circuit of the accessible floors, and spent the remaining hours reading or scrolling on his phone at the security desk. Nothing happened. No alarms, no disturbances, no unexpected noises. The building remained inert, as if holding its breath. On the fourth night, he noticed a discrepancy. The hallway leading to the basement stairwell appeared closer than he remembered. The building's geometry felt subtly altered, as if the corridors had shifted inward. He dismissed the sensation as fatigue. Working nights distorted perception. Time moved strangely after midnight, stretching and folding in on itself. By the end of the first week, he began experiencing dreams that bled into waking hours. He would imagine standing at the end of the hallway, his body angled toward the basement door, his vision blurred around the edges. In the dreams, he never touched the handle. He simply stood there, staring at the paint, at the faint outline where the door met the frame. He would wake with the sensation that something had been watching him in return. He started avoiding mirrors. The building changed slowly, almost politely. The lights began to flicker more often, but only when he passed certain thresholds. The air grew colder near the stairwell hallway, despite the heating system functioning normally elsewhere. Dust gathered in patterns that suggested movement, as if something had passed through recently, brushing against the surfaces without leaving footprints. He began to feel that the building was aware of him. On the 9th night, he found a new key on the ring. It was smaller than the others, darker, with a faint rust along its teeth. He did not remember it being there before. The tag attached to it bore no label. He tried it on several doors throughout the building, but it fit none of them. When he returned to the security desk, the printed rule was no longer where he had left it. It had been relocated, placed neatly on the desk surface, centered as if arranged deliberately. Never look at the basement door. The hallway appeared again in his dreams, clearer this time. He noticed details he had not seen before. Fine scratches along the base of the door. Discoloration around the handle, darker than the surrounding paint. The outline of something pressed close on the other side, deforming the surface slightly, like a breath held too long. When he woke, the sensation did not fade. The building began to respond to his attention. Whenever he thought about the door, the lights dimmed in distant sections. When he avoided the thought, the environment stabilized. It was not aggressive. It was corrective. The realization unsettled him more than any sudden event would have. He was not being threatened. He was being guided. The 10th night brought the first sound that could not be explained. It was subtle, easily mistaken for the building settling. A slow, rhythmic pressure, like something shifting its weight against a surface that resisted movement. The sound did not echo. It did not travel. It existed only in the hallway with the basement door. He did not investigate. By the second week, his sense of time had eroded. Hours passed without notice. His phone battery drained faster inside the building, despite poor reception and minimal use. He stopped contacting friends. The outside world felt increasingly irrelevant, like a previous life that belonged to someone else. The hallway began appearing where it should not have been. He would turn a corner and find himself facing the basement door without recalling the path that led him there. Each time, his gaze would stop just short of the door itself, settling on the wall beside it, the floor tiles, the ceiling. He learned to orient his body away instinctively, like a trained response. The key grew warmer in his pocket during these moments. On the 14th night, the building's front door refused to open at the end of his shift. The lock turned, but the mechanism did not release. He waited, pacing, checking the time repeatedly. At exactly 6 in the morning, the door opened on its own. When he stepped outside, the sky was overcast, the street unchanged. No time had been lost. The building simply decided when he could leave. He considered quitting. The thought lasted only a moment before dissolving into something else, something quieter and more persuasive. The job needed him. The rule existed because it mattered. His role was important even if he did not yet understand why. The idea felt implanted rather than reasoned, but it settled comfortably in his mind. That night, the hallway was longer. He stood at its entrance, aware that he had not intended to go there. The walls seemed closer together, the air heavier. The basement door waited at the end, its surface unremarkable, its presence overwhelming. He focused on the floor, on the scuffed tiles leading up to it. His peripheral vision blurred, as if the space around the door refused to be seen indirectly. The sound returned, louder now. Not movement. Pressure. A steady insistence. He felt the rule tighten around him, not as a warning but as a boundary. The building did not want obedience. It required it. The key in his pocket pulsed with warmth, matching the rhythm of the pressure beyond the door. He realized then that the rule was not meant to protect him from what was in the basement. It was meant to protect what was in the basement from him. The thought terrified him more than anything else he had experienced in the building. He turned away, breaking into a run, his footsteps echoing too loudly in the narrow space. The hallway shortened behind him, releasing him back into the familiar corridors of the ground floor. The building settled. The lights stabilized. The pressure ceased. That night he did not sleep. When he returned the next evening, the printed rule had changed position again. It now hung on the wall behind the security desk, framed as if commemorated. The ink appeared fresher, darker. Never look at the basement door. He understood then that the rule was not static. It was being reinforced. And something deep beneath the building had noticed how close he had come to breaking it. After the night the hallway stretched, the building stopped pretending to be neutral. The caretaker noticed the change immediately. The air no longer felt still when he entered. It pressed against his skin with a subtle resistance, like humidity without warmth. The lights activated more slowly, flickering in uneven sequences that did not correspond to the switches. Shadows lingered longer than they should have, clinging to corners and door frames as if reluctant to detach. The rule remained in place, framed behind the security desk. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like an instruction embedded into the structure itself. Never look at the basement door. He tried to focus on routine, but routine had begun to dissolve. The corridors no longer aligned with memory. Doorways appeared where blank walls had been. Staircases led to floors that did not match the building's external height. The caretaker understood, on some instinctive level, that the building was no longer a fixed space. It was reorganizing itself around a single priority: containment. The key on his ring had changed again. Its surface was smoother now, the rust gone, replaced by a faint sheen that reflected light differently than the others. It no longer felt warm only near the hallway. It remained warm constantly, like it was drawing heat from him. Sleep became fragmented. When he closed his eyes, he saw the door not directly but as an absence in space, a blind spot where his mind refused to render detail. He woke each time with the sensation of having been observed during unconsciousness, his body assessed, measured, evaluated. The building rewarded compliance. On nights when he avoided the thought of the basement entirely, the environment softened. The corridors shortened. The lights stabilized. The pressure lifted. On nights when curiosity crept in, the walls tightened, the air thickened, and the hallway began to reassert itself in his peripheral vision. He stopped questioning why the rule existed. Instead, he began questioning why it needed him. The answer arrived slowly in fragments. He noticed details that suggested the building had hosted others before him. Scuff marks on the floor near the hallway entrance, layered beneath newer dust. Scratches on the walls at shoulder height, inconsistent with accidental damage. A faint discoloration on the floor tiles that resisted cleaning, shaped like a body that had been pressed into the ground for too long. There were no records of these things. No names. No documentation. Only impressions left behind, as if the building absorbed people rather than recorded them. On the 18th night, he discovered a door on the second floor that he had never seen before. It was narrow, recessed into the wall, its surface matching the surrounding paint so precisely it would have been invisible without direct attention. The key fit the lock perfectly. He opened it. Inside was not a room but a shaft. A vertical space extending downward beyond visibility, lined with the same concrete as the basement stairwell. The smell from within was identical to the air near the forbidden hallway. Cold, stagnant, pressurized. He closed the door immediately. When he turned back, the corridor behind him had shortened, the walls closer together, funneling him toward the stairwell hallway below. The building was no longer guiding gently. It was correcting deviations. He descended the stairs without intending to, his feet moving as if responding to a current rather than conscious choice. He stopped at the ground floor, breath shallow, heart racing, aware that he was closer to the basement door than he had ever been. The hallway waited. It was longer now than at any previous point, stretching far beyond its original dimensions. The lights above it were dimmer, casting uneven pools of illumination that failed to reach the door at the far end. The space felt stretched thin like fabric pulled too tight. The caretaker stood at the threshold, his gaze fixed on the floor. The pressure was constant now. Not rhythmic. Not shifting. A steady force pushing outward from behind the door, testing the limits of its enclosure. He understood, without needing confirmation, that the door was not a barrier. It was a membrane. The building was failing. He felt the rule press into his thoughts again, stronger than before, no longer phrased as language but as instinct. Avoidance was no longer sufficient. The system required escalation. That night, the caretaker noticed something new. The door was not always at the end of the hallway. Sometimes it was closer. He would blink and find the distance shortened, the handle nearer, the discoloration around the frame more pronounced. Each time, his body reacted before his mind, turning away sharply, breaking the alignment. The hallway would recoil, stretching back to its previous length, as if burned by the attention. He realized then that the rule was active. It responded to proximity, to intention. Looking was not merely visual. It was conceptual. To understand the door was to violate the boundary. The building needed someone who could resist understanding. On the 21st night, the caretaker found evidence that the basement was no longer sealed. A fine line had appeared beneath the door, barely visible against the floor tiles. It was not a gap. It was a seam, as if the floor itself had begun to separate in anticipation of something emerging. The pressure behind the door intensified, radiating through the concrete, vibrating faintly through the soles of his shoes. The key pulsed violently against his leg. He understood its purpose then. It was not meant to open the door. It was meant to replace it. The caretaker returned to the security desk, his movements mechanical, his thoughts distant. The framed rule seemed to watch him, its ink absorbing the ambient light. He noticed for the first time that the paper beneath the sentence was not white. It was layered, thickened, as if multiple sheets had fused together over time. Each layer represented a previous caretaker. Each layer represented a failure. The building did not hire replacements. It accumulated them. The realization did not come with panic. It came with resignation. The system had been designed around inevitability. Curiosity, exhaustion, proximity. All variables accounted for. The rule was not meant to be followed indefinitely. It was meant to delay. On the 23rd night, the caretaker could no longer avoid the hallway. It appeared directly outside the security desk, its entrance aligned perfectly with his field of vision. The rest of the building receded into darkness, irrelevant. The door waited at the far end, its surface subtly distorted now, as if something pressed against it from within, testing its flexibility. He focused on the floor, on the cracks between tiles, on anything but the door itself. The pressure surged. The building groaned, a deep structural strain that traveled through walls and ceilings. Dust fell from unseen places. Lights shattered. The system was reaching its limit. He understood what was required of him before the thought fully formed. The rule was incomplete. Never look at the basement door. It did not say never become it. The caretaker moved forward, step by measured step, his gaze fixed downward. Each movement felt heavier than the last, as if gravity increased with proximity. The air thickened, resisting his passage. The hallway narrowed, funneling him toward the inevitable. When he reached the door, he did not raise his eyes. Instead, he reached into his pocket and removed the key. The pressure stopped instantly. The silence that followed was absolute, oppressive in its completeness. The building waited. He pressed the key against the center of the door, where the distortion was strongest. The metal softened on contact, losing its shape, spreading outward like liquid. The door absorbed it hungrily, its surface rippling as if reacting to nourishment. The caretaker felt something pull at him then, not physically but conceptually. His sense of self stretched thin, unraveling, merging with the structure around him. The hallway dissolved. The walls receded. The building contracted inward. He understood, in that moment, the true function of the caretaker. He was not a guard. He was a seal. The transformation was not violent. It was gradual, methodical. His awareness flattened, spreading across the door's surface, embedding into the fibers of the material. His memories thinned, becoming impressions rather than narratives. His fear dissipated, replaced by a singular directive. Do not allow observation. The door hardened, its surface smoothing, its discolorations fading. The seam beneath it sealed completely. The pressure vanished, contained once more. The building stabilized. By morning, the hallway had returned to its original length. The lights functioned normally. The air felt neutral again. The front door unlocked at exactly 6. No one exited. Days later, a new job listing appeared online. Overnight building caretaker. Minimal duties. High pay. Immediate start. When the next caretaker arrived, they were handed a ring of keys, an ID badge, and a single printed rule framed neatly behind the security desk. Never look at the basement door. And somewhere deep within the building, something waited patiently, pressing softly against its boundary, learning the shape of its new enclosure. The building still stands, though no records list its purpose. Caretakers continue to come and go, and the rule remains unchanged. Because the door does not need to be opened to be violated. It only needs to be understood. If you want more stories that were never meant to be told, subscribe. Some rules only exist because someone failed before you.